When most of you think about fishing smallmouth, especially up north, from a northern angler from Minnesota like myself, you're thinking flimsy, silly, egg beater, fairy wands, super light line, but that's not always the case. I'm going to go ahead and share my top 5 best producing smallmouth rod and reel setups from this past season, and I bet at least a few of these are going to surprise some of you. Speaking of brownbacks, had to dress the part, got my smallmouth bronzeback hoodie on today. All right. Yes, to the obvious statement question, can you catch fish on the same rods and reels, whether it's a largemouth, a smallmouth, a spotted bass? Yes, but there are inherent characteristics of certain rods and reels that lend themselves to be species specific and are a little better for some of these techniques for certain species, and that's why I want to share these, break these down, and explain to you why I use some of these rods, and it may shed some light on how you pick future rods and reels for yourself, whether you're targeting largemouth, smallmouth, or spots. As promised, this is a follow-up video to a largemouth combo setup video I recently did. The criteria, these are not necessarily my favorite, not necessarily my most expensive setups, but the ones that were absolutely the most productive, aka caught the most smallmouth bass last season. I'm going to go ahead and order these a little bit, what I would say mild to wild, starting with some of the most obvious traditional smallmouth setups and ending on some that maybe you haven't thought about. Don't worry, if I'm going too fast, you're trying to keep up, I will have notes, detailed lists in the description, so you don't have to worry about taking notes or writing any of this down. Just enjoy the video. Starting off in the leadoff position is actually a pair of spinning rods. Yeah, so we're starting with the most obvious, the most traditional, the fairy wand, the spinning rods that most of you think about when you think about northern Great Lakes, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan smallmouth fishing. While I have a lot of spinning rods, these two get most of the action when smallmouth fishing. The first one is a Champion 702 SF. This is a pre-XP, but the new XP models are great as well. So this is a 7-foot 2-power, which is a medium light, fast action, rated for 1/8 to 1/2 ounce. And I got this paired up with an older size 3000 Procyon reel. Love the bigger reels for smallmouth light line. I'll explain some other video on why that is, but if you haven't tried them out, definitely check them out. This older Procyon has been really good to me. One of my favorite reels. I wish I had a few more of these. Typically spooled with 12 to 15 pound braid and a long 8-pound fluorocarbon leader. Now, this one, for the most part for me, is going to have little K-Tex, Ned rigs, things like that, exposed hooks, small jig heads. That's typically what I have on this, but this will work great for drop shot and a lot of their finesse techniques. The big brother, so to say, of that reel is the Champion Extreme Dobyns 742 spinning rod. 4 inches longer, similar action, a little bit more taper in this one. I just love this for smallmouth. Traditionally, this is most of the time going to have a drop shot on it, but I also will throw some hair jigs, any of the other techniques mentioned before, K-Tex, Neds, etc. This one is paired up with a Tutula 4000, similar braid and fluorocarbon setup. Typically like a fairly long leader, anywhere from 8 to 12 feet, even sometimes letting it get into the spool on these setups. One thing you'll note is a lot of times, depending on the rod and reel setup, I will add these little Fuji keepers for additional places of hook and drop shot, and even sometimes some little Velcro wraps, just to give me more ways to secure things and keep things organized in the boat. So those are just little add-ons, and I'll add some descriptions down below if you want to pick up some of those additional hook keepers for some of your spinning or smallmouth rods. That's the last of the spinning rods for today. Next up, this one was really good to me this year. Started the year strong, ended the year strong. This is my jerkbait rod. This rod I use for a lot of 110 style jerkbaits, whether that's Megabass, Jackal Rearrange, Provokes, Yozuri, whatever your poison is. This is a Dobyns 704 CB in the Champion series. This is the pre-XP version, and this is the non-glass version. I prefer non-glass. I like the sensitivity and the feel and the snap of the non-glass, especially for jerkbaits and ripping and getting that crisp action. So that's a 7-foot 4-power and kind of a crankbait. So it's a reaction moving bait action, which has a different action than the traditional 704 rods. This is a medium, moderate fast action, 1/4 to 3/4 ounce baits. I typically have this spooled up with 12-pound line. I actually got kind of an old Corrado Super Free Bantam, which is an oldie but a goodie, but it really casts jerkbaits well. And hey, if it works, it's not broken. Just to prove to you that not all my stuff is brand new. So I still, use a lot of my older reels on a lot of setups. For me, 7 foot is the perfect size. I know some people like a 6'10" or 6'8" for jerkbaits, but for me, 7 foot casting distance, I can still work it well. A lot of success on this with this particular re-range. Typically going to have 12-pound big game mono. I still like mono for some of my moving baits and jerkbaits, so that's the setup. And to me, this is the ultimate jerkbait rod as far as I'm concerned. We can't talk about smallmouth without talking about tubes. For me, tubes aren't traditionally a spinning rod. Now, on some of those first 2 spinning rods, I will throw a tiny tube, like a little bitty tube on that. But for my normal, like 3.5-inch tubes, I'm throwing a casting rod. I really like the Dobyns Extreme 743. That's 7 foot, 4 power, 3 action, which they describe as a medium heavy fast action. But this is definitely lighter than most people's medium heavies. Dobyns actions are slightly different, and there is no standard for rod actions from manufacturer to manufacturer. So take that. Some of these ratings are a little bit different for Dobyns, but this has a pretty good bend to it. I find it ideal for casting tubes, skipping tubes, whether it's around cover or open water. I'll fish them on an exposed jig head or as a stupid tube. If you see my best baits of the year video, the stupid tube was a big, huge player all year long. Typically going to have 12-ish pound fluorocarbon, but I will bump it up to 16 if I'm around cover. I'm using an older Chronarch 50E. I like these smaller reels for casting lighter line and lighter baits like tubes. I actually like this so much, I've got 2 of these. These are my mainstays in the boat when it comes to smallmouth fishing. And I can use this for finesse jigs, small football jigs, tubes, mojo rigs. I can throw some K-Tex on this rod. I can do a lot of different things. This is just an all-around great smallmouth rod, and that's why I got 2 of them. For me, nothing says smallmouth quite like topwaters. And so I actually got 2 topwater rods here that kind of co-hold this spot, and they're kind of intermingled. I have a Dobyns Fury 703, which I find is a really great action for poppers, small walking baits, things like that. I currently got it paired up with a Dobyns Maverick 7 gear ratio reel. Been testing this out. There will be a specific standalone videos for this Dobyns Mavericks reel, casting reel review. That'll be come later. So if you're interested in more rod, reel, gear videos, content like this, consider subscribing so you don't miss those future videos. Now, for topwater, I'm going to run these typically with 40-pound braid to a very, very short, like 8, 10, 12-inch fluorocarbon monofilament leader. This has probably got some big game, 15 or 20-pound big game on this popper. This is a Yellow Magic bone popper. This is a great value rod, can do a lot of things, but for me, it's primarily a topwater rod. And I like the 7 foot 3-inch or 7 foot even size for poppers. This is also called a medium heavy fast action. But like I said, like the 3 powers are more like a medium plus for a lot of other rod manufacturers. Again, this one has kind of a big brother in this scenario, in this setup, and that is the Sierra 733. So this is 7 foot 3-inch 3 power, so same power. The Sierra has a slightly more moderate action, so the Sierra would be good for these topwaters in either scenario. But then again, we're also still running 40-pound braid, still have that short leader. This looks like maybe a 6-inch, 17-pound Cajun Red Lightning. Here we got a Vixen, so I like the 7.3 for my walking baits. A lot of times it's a Vixen for me, an evergreen shower blow. Could be a jaywalker, could be a sexy dog. There's a lot of good options out there for topwaters, but popping baits and walking baits are a mainstay for me fishing smallmouth. This one is paired up with a basic Tatula CT and a 7.1. So for these topwaters, I like a 7+ gear ratio. You're typically casting out, and when you get to the end of a cast, you want to burn it back in or catch up to a fish that's surging on it. So those are my 2 main topwater. I like the power. I like braid. Cast further, get better hook sets, and I land more fish. All right, here we are on the final rod setup for Smallies, and this one probably is going to surprise you. This is a Dobyns Champion XP 764. Yes, 764, a 7.6 rod, 4 power, which is a heavy, fast action. So this is a very specific rod that I use for a lot of different things, but the thing that I've really learned to love for smallmouth, especially this year, is throwing the Minnesota rig. So light Alabama rigs, Minnesota rigs, things like that. This one is all blades with 1 hook because that's what we can do here in Minnesota. But this is a great rod for launching this, keeping it where you want it in the water column, and jack and smallmouth that eat it. I had a really good outing this fall, did really well in the Minnesota rig, one of my most productive days all year. But this can be a great pre-spawn, Even summer and early to late fall is a deadly way to catch smallmouth that orientate and chase bait in your favorite fisheries. So I'm using this rod. This rod could also be used for Carolina rigs, football jigs, things like that as well. It's got a lot of purposes, and I'll use it for light swim baits and things like that. But as a Minnesota rig rod, it's awesome. This one's paired up with a Daiwa Coastal, and I've got 20-pound fluorocarbon for throwing those rigs. Be honest. Let me know in the comments. Did you guess what that final oddball rod combo for smallmouth is going to be? If you enjoyed this video, got any benefit at all, please consider giving a like down below. And if you're at all intrigued on what my largemouth setups were from this past season, then watch this video coming up on the screen right here.